Welcome back to the shop. I'm Jeff from today's Craftsman, and today we're going to make a miter sled. You may have seen this in our last video or some of the previous videos. I think we've used it. This is just a little miter sled that goes on the table saw. Nice for cutting small moldings, and it's really easy to make. It's just made of 4 pieces, 2 runners, this base piece, and a triangle. Got all our parts here at the bench. We have our 2 runners. They have to be made out of walnut. If they're not made out of walnut, you can't get accurate miters. I'm kidding, but we'll put these on at the table saw. So we'll put these to the side for now. I have the base piece and the triangle. So this is just a piece of MDF that I cut over on the panel saw, but you can cut this any way you like. Just get it relatively square. Get it as square as you can. Square is best, but this doesn't have to be perfectly square. First thing we'll do is make a center line here. So 16 1/4, we have 8 1/8. Take your, this is a silver woodpecker. Strike a line. And then we'll take our triangle. So I'll tell you how I made this. First, I cut a square. So this was a perfect square. I know that I have 90 on all 4 corners. You can do that, again, miter saw, table saw, whatever. Just make sure that you have nice 90-degree corners, at least one, the one that you're gonna cut off. So I checked, made sure that this was 90, perfectly 90. And then I actually took this to the miter saw and I cut this off at a 45-degree angle. What you could do is measure over. This is roughly 8 inches. You can measure over 8, and cut it off. The length of these sides isn't super crucial. What really matters is that this is 90. Because no matter what, if you reference one side and then the other, you're going to end up with 90. It doesn't matter what the length of these are. It's just, we're trying to get it as close to perfect as possible. So I'll grab some glue and some screws, and I'm going to attach this, excuse me, with the point of the triangle right on this line. Don't put any screws here. We're all screwed down, making sure that we don't have any screws in the center line because we don't want to cut through any screws. And I made sure that the back was nice and flush. So now we're ready to take this to the table saw and we can install the runners. These are our runners. I made these out of walnut, but they could be made out of anything. The runners on this original one are made out of HDPE, which is high density polyethylene. Super slick plastic, which is a really good option. We just didn't have any. You could buy runners that are adjustable. They're a little bit finicky. I just made these. So these are just, some hardwood runners. They run in there real nice, and they're quarter sawn. So when this changes size, it's going to change this way. That's very important because if you make it with the grain running this way and it fits today, it might not fit tomorrow or the next day. You're going to be going from not being able to move the sled to the sled being super sloppy. You can see these don't have any play side to side. So what I did is I took digital calipers. You can get these super cheap. These ones are pretty nice. They're not like super expensive, but I got a reading of both miter slots, and then I just crept up on it at the planer, and I actually sanded the last little bit off. So I left these a little bit heavy and then sanded the last little bit off. So we have nicely fitting runners, and you could see when I ripped them down, I left them thinner than what this overall dimension would be. That's because if there's ever anything down in this slot, I don't want it to interfere with the sled. So what we're going to actually do is is stick some washers down here to shim this up temporarily. Because what we're going to do is we're going to actually glue these. So I'm just above the surface. We're going to glue these to this. Put some washers down here. Now we can't just go and just like slap this thing down and hope for the best. So what we're going to do is lower our blade, and if you remember, we had 8 1/8 to the center of this jig. Our blade is 1/8 of an inch thick. So if I want to get the center of this line in the center of the blade, I can set this fence to 8 1/16. And I know that this fence is square enough that when I lay this down, you know, will be pretty square. Doesn't have to be perfectly square, again, because as long as this is 90, we're going to end up with complementary angles that equal 90. So what I like to do is line up the runners with the back of the table saw here, and then I'm going to drop this down flush with those. Before we put on too much glue, I'll just mark these runners. I always like to have more runners sticking out of the front. That way, you know, I have more travel on the sled. We're not going to cut this anywhere past, you know, about here, like you could see on this one. So I'm not worried about having a bunch of extra runner back this way. I have just some CA glue. Don't need a ton here. This is just temporary. We're going to actually put some screws in this once we get it stuck. I've tried to do it where you just screw them on, but it never works. So I have our glue, some activator. This stuff sets up really fast, but I've made the mistake before of pulling it up too soon. So what we'll probably do is just let this sit here for a couple minutes to make sure that these are stuck enough that I can flip this over without them moving at all. I think we're ready to flip this over. Hope for the best, otherwise we're going to be starting this video over. All right, cool. So you see we're stuck, at least stuck enough. What I'm going to do is just mark a rough center line. I have these little 3/4 inch, 6 by 3/4 inch screws. This is 5/16, so that'll be a good length for these. And I'll just drill and countersink, you know, maybe four on each. So there's your sled, fully assembled. Take your washers out now. And the last step, you can see how nice this runs. Actually, it runs a little bit better than the original. And there's no side-to-side slop. So the last step is just to raise the blade, and we'll cut in, you know, say to here. Maybe we'll cut something and see if it's 90?
Sure.
So. Back at the bench, we cut this piece in half. We could check it for square now. So there's our miter. And there you go, perfectly square. We mentioned it in the last video, but we definitely like to cut our miters at the table saw. Obviously, you're not going to be cutting crown molding or anything like that on this type of jig, but any small molding, little OG molding for the doors, or you know, any type of small applied molding, we really like the table saw and this type of jig to cut them. You know, it's something that you could work into your workflow, and you know, you could make these for 22.5 or really any angle. This is just a way to do it, and you could even make a regular 90-degree crosscut sled in the same fashion. So hopefully you picked a few things up. If you have any questions, leave them down below, or any comments, and we'll see you on the next one.
Welcome back to my shop. I'm John from Today's Craftsman. And when Jeff finished making this sled, Jeff and Rob and I were talking, we thought it'd be neat to see if this sled is going to work just as well in my saw, since we have the exact same table saws. This is the 3 horsepower industrial saw stop table saw. So I'll take it over here, drop it in the miter slots, and it works pretty good. No slop, runs pretty nice. So we figured if we wanted to know that, you would too. So hope you enjoyed this video. If you've been enjoying this channel, I hope that you'll hit that subscribe button, tell a friend, and we'll see you next time.